Welcome, everyone. As we're waiting for people to join, we can just go ahead with a few housekeeping items, but welcome to today's discussion. A second part of a training we had yesterday on the role of the first responders in the CARE Act. As far as housekeeping items, we are using the Q&A feature. We'll show a screenshot. There is a recent Zoom update, so it could look differently depending on which version you have, and we'll show that to you. You can also chat the HMA team if you have Zoom technical issues. But having the questions in the Q&A means that we can do follow-up later, and you can also respond to other people's questions as well. And in case there is a security issue, we'll just shut down this meeting and follow up with you. So let's take a look at what that Q&A looks like. So on the left is what it used to look like. On the right is that new what it looks like. You can comment, respond to other people's questions, or upvote, which looks like a like if it's a question you've had to. So a quick overview of what we plan to go today, but today is a lot less structured and formal by design. We do have a few things we want to follow up with from the training that were asked in the Q&A or also in some evaluations. So we have a few things we wanted to bring up to the group, and then we hope to have a panel discussion. The open Q&A is listed on here as a separate item, but we can that can flow into the panel discussion as well. So please, if you have questions that you would love the panelists to weigh in on, or other participants on the call, you're interested in their perspective, go ahead and do that, and you don't have to wait till a Q&A session. So now that we have those items out of the way, I'd love to introduce our speakers today. We have Dr. Deborah Rose from HMA. Again, she's a licensed clinical psychologist and who has experience working with social services agency, behavioral health centers, care coordination, and supported housing and services. And she's passionate about and has done a lot of work related to assisted outpatient treatment programs. We're also joined by Raul Dominguez, who joined us yesterday, and he's the manager of the Stanislaus County Community Assessment Response and Engagement Team, another care team that predated CARE Act, but now they're repurposing that infrastructure that they had built. So he is a probation officer in the county and works closely with law enforcement partners. Anthony Ruffin, we're pleased to have him join today. He currently works at the Los Angeles County Harm Reduction Division, and he has over 24 years of experience in social services. He works and is passionate about serving vulnerable and at-risk persons that are homeless, and he has done work as an outreach specialist throughout the county of LA. And then, of course, Dr. Susan Partovi is a family physician practicing homeless medicine for about 20 years, and she specializes working with those with serious mental illness and substance use disorder. So we're really pleased to hear from their perspectives and how first responders can interact with the CARE Act. And before we get to that panel discussion, I'll turn the time over to Dr. Rose to go over some of the information that people had questions about. Deborah?
Thank you, Patricia. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and also for our panelists. Welcome back. Look forward to partnering with you again. We're going to just do a quick follow-up of some of the training that we covered yesterday. It will be available for you on the care-act.org website shortly, and if you weren't able to join us, you'll be able to review that for more information in detail. So let's do a recap of some of the highlights, some of the important talking points before we invite our panelists to join. Next slide, please. We talked yesterday, really big takeaway is that first responders, and there are a variety of first responders, law enforcement, mobile crisis outreach, homeless outreach, other first responders are eligible care petitioners. And that can be done in a couple of ways. The first way that a first responder can help to serve individuals who may be care eligible is as the petitioner. In this event, the first responder is completing the information and is working with their county court, and it looks different in every county. We do want to point out it's really important to look at the county website. We have a list on our website of counties that are currently active and accepting care petitions. And so it's about completing the application and submitting the application to the court. This is about work that they've done with an individual who they believe would benefit from care proceedings. And so that petition may be filed electronically, it may be done in person, it may be via paper or email. It varies again by county. Really important to know that the petitioner, the first responder, does not need to prove that somebody is eligible. It's really about a good faith effort. They don't need to be certain of a diagnosis or even the other eligibility qualifications. It is up to the judge, who has the broad discretion and who decides if a care proceeding will occur. So we encourage first responders as petitioners to fill out what you know. I'll talk in a moment about some of the forms and where you can document some of that information. Providing whatever's available based on your observations and your interactions as petitioner. The second way that a first responder may be a participant as a care petitioner is to partner with other organizations or agencies in that effort. In most cases, it will be partnering with their county behavioral health organization, who will file the petition. There may also be liaisons. We heard yesterday in the example of Stanislaus County that our colleague, who will talk in a moment, is the liaison to other law enforcement in his county. And so people contact him and work with him to file on their behalf. And so there's a number of opportunities, again, as direct petitioner and as a partner to petitioners. As a reminder, there are some links on the bottom of your screen, and that'll take you to information about your county and other counties. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what's in a petition? What matters? Well, we have a couple of forms that are identified on the screen. The initial form, the Care 100 form, it is a statewide form. It is standard throughout California. This is the opportunity to share with the court what you know, what you believe has happened, what you understand about the individual, what you've witnessed. Perhaps this person has been living on the streets. You may be able to gather information from community members, from family members. This is a place, there's an opportunity to write it out. There's narrative boxes that are part of this. And again, as petitioner, you don't need to prove eligibility, prove diagnosis. This is the opportunity for the court to take a first glance and to say this person may or does meet qualifications for care. The second forms are one of two things. These must be attached to the Care 100 form. One is either a declaration from a behavioral health professional, and this is a person who has said, I've either recently treated or I've tried to examine the person with the intention of assessing care eligibility. Maybe that's not available. Instead, or in lieu of, there can be a very broad opportunity for a declaration, evidence, and affidavit. And these are things where the petitioner might attach a description of what he or she knows, what their believed services have occurred or haven't occurred in the past, perhaps information of transportation or of discharge from hospitals. And so one of those two forms should accompany the Care 100 form. Really want to reinforce here, though, that again, this isn't about passing a test. There's no gold stars for getting it right. It's about writing down what you know to support the petition, because ultimately the judge has broad discretion on whether he or she thinks that the respondent meets or may meet care eligibility. There are, again, a number of links that are on the bottom of your screen, so we encourage you to take a few moments, click on those links, and then you'll be able to gather more information. We are going to show you the forms. I think we can move forward, and a quick highlight. A number of people have asked where they can get the forms and what they look like. This is a copy of the CARE 100 form. Again, this is the statewide form. It is standard across California. It includes petitioner information. It includes respondent information, whatever you have available. It's information about your relationship or the petitioner's relationship to the individual, what he or she knows about eligibility potential, and then any other information that you think would be beneficial for the judge and for the court to know. And then we have an additional form for you. We're talking about the supporting documentation, and I mentioned either there is a declaration from a licensed behavioral health professional, and if that's not available, then there could be information that comes in various forms. Perhaps it's an affidavit. We've heard that judges are accepting written out information. I believe that this person lives on this corner. I believe that this person has previously been to the hospital multiple times. I believe that this person has recently been discharged from a hospital. Some of the behaviors that are observed. All of this is to essentially create a package that can help the court recognize if this is an individual who might benefit from the services and the supports, the behavioral health services, substance use services, perhaps housing, perhaps medication, or other social services. So together, this allows the judge to make decisions on if care proceeds.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Deborah.
Patricia.
Thanks for going over those. And there were some questions yesterday. Can we get these links afterwards? These links will be in the materials. Those are posted within 10 to 14 days. And we always send a link to those training materials in our newsletter. We will also reply to those who have registered for this meeting when those are posted. You also have them in your chat, so if you're interested in looking at those, you can pop them open and take a look at them at another point. So thanks for going over those, Deborah. If anyone has follow-up questions or wants to share anything, again, please submit questions to the Q&A and we can discuss them in a moment. So now I'm going to turn to our panel discussion with our panelists, and we're actually going to take the slides down so we can talk with each other. So we have a number of questions, and again, please submit questions in the Q&A and we'll raise them as I can. We might do some follow-up or add FAQs to the website after as well. So again, thank you to the panelists for joining and sharing your perspective, a number of different perspectives, but all passionate individuals who have been working with this, with the care population. So I'm going to start off with a few questions for Raul. Raul, you talked yesterday about how the care work is built upon a collaboration that was pre-existing in the county that provides a similar multidisciplinary approach with law enforcement linking with county BH. Can you talk about that collaboration between first responders and county BH that really laid the groundwork for your care work?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So I think, I feel when the care team came about was to identify the barriers that the unhoused population were having in the community. So we noticed in the community there was more people that were unhoused that were dealing with moments of distress. So moments of, where they're out in the community saying in the middle of the street, responding to auditory hallucinations or visual hallucinations. And it wasn't really a crime, something that someone would be booked in jail or spend much time in jail for. So that was the idea with the care team, is to find those barriers and try to identify them so we kind of reduce those numbers of instances when someone is in those moments of distress. And that's kind of how the collaboration works. So law enforcement was dealing with these individuals, receiving a lot of calls for service. And really, it wasn't for law enforcement to deal with. It was more of a mental health issue that needed to be addressed. So how do we address those mental health issues? And that's kind of how the care team came in. So those people were then referred to the care team for us to work with them. So on the care team, we have mental health clinicians, behavioral health specialists, an array of different services throughout the county that we can provide the services to people in the community out where they are. So one of the biggest things was meeting people where they are, not having them come to the appointments or meeting or having them come to an office, but meeting them where they're staying, where they're living, to provide those services to them. So that's kind of how we started building that collaborative between law enforcement and behavioral health, was to really identify that population. And it kind of just naturally was a natural flow to go into the Care Act process, because those individuals were already being referred to the care team through the county. So we were able to then go and kind of triage, like, what is the best service for this person. And as Care Act was implemented in Stanislaus County, we were able to see individuals that were like, all right, maybe Care Act is best for this one. This one's probably the best thing to do is get them some other type of medical services before we, or not refer them to the Care Act. So those are the ways. That's kind of how it just naturally flowed into becoming Care Team, Care Act, kind of molding together.
Yeah. And if I could ask a couple follow-up questions, and this call is representative of that. I feel like first responders and county BH come at this question or this process with a different perspective. What would your advice be for first responders and county BH who are going to be working together that come from different backgrounds and, have different ways of addressing problems?
I think one of the biggest things is understanding each other's roles and limitations. Also, we'll all have different policies, different laws that govern each profession. So understanding those and then finding ways to work together through them and understanding each other's roles and how we can support them. For us, one of the biggest things, and I bring this up, is in law enforcement, we're used to, going out, having an arrest, then following up with, was there enough probable cause to, or was the DA going to file on this arrest? And if they didn't, then what was I missing in my investigation to get the arrest going? And this constant follow-up, right? And following up with district attorney and following up with what information do I need? Whereas with behavioral health, we're not available to receive that information always. So it's kind of understanding, like, okay, where do I hand it off to behavioral health? And then they take it from there, and then understanding that through some of the HIPAA laws, we're not going to receive some of that information from behavioral health. But at the same time, working together to make sure, like, this is where I think I've done my job as law enforcement. Now have somebody to talk to in behavioral health to pass it over to do their portion on the behavioral health side. So it's really understanding the roles and kind of finding a way to collaborate to be able to bring that whole care of a person. So if it's something criminal, we deal with it on the criminal side through law enforcement. If it's something more behavioral health, having a contact for behavioral health to kind of take the baton and take it into that field.
And then a follow-up, you mentioned PHI or protected health information. While some healthcare providers have limitations to sharing that health information, some first responders don't. So how has your team handled that while building collaboration with County BH?
So we've developed memorandums of understanding through the county for us to be able to work and share information amongst our team members on the care team. So those members on the team can share information on these individuals, and also releases of information that when we work with individuals, we put down the agencies and who we're going to communicate with and make sure that they're aware and they're following up with signing them and renewing them as we continue to work with them. So it's just making sure that we have that information, who we've sent to county council, make sure that it's legal for us to do that. And then also that the individual knows that who we're going to be sharing their information with, and that they're okay with it. And we've noticed most individuals are okay with it because they know that they're going to receive the help that they need, and they're really ready to engage with us and move on from the barriers that they've had throughout their lives, really treat their mental health or their substance use or medical issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Raul. And I see a couple questions in the chat. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Anne. We have a couple questions slated to address that, but thanks for submitting those. I'm now going to turn to Dr. Partovi and Anthony. to speak to some tips you have for including on the petition or a referral, because we talked about sometimes it's submitting the petition yourself, sometimes it's just referring to do a petition to demonstrate eligibility for care. So even if a first responder doesn't know the exact diagnosis, or what it is, what your advice is. So we'll start with Dr. Partovi and then have Anthony weigh in.
Hi, thanks. So I was actually doing one yesterday of a patient of mine that I see regularly through urgent care. And to be honest, I really don't know her diagnosis. But she does things like she'll drink excessive amounts of water to where her sodium level is so low that she has to get hospitalized, and which is medically is really, really dangerous. Like, you can die. So she does stuff like that, or she'll do the opposite, where she says she physically doesn't even know what it means to drink. Like this one time, she didn't know how to drink, and I don't know what that's called. But I just wrote that down, as examples. It sounds like some kind of psychotic behavior to me, but I don't know it. She doesn't hear voices, and so I just write down exactly, what I've experienced with her. So that's example of one person that I've been trying to deal with.
Thanks, Dr. Partovi. So documenting what you do know, and writing down what you observe, what seems to be dangerous, and speaking to eligibility. Anthony, what are some recommendations that you have for how to get this history, how to demonstrate eligibility for first responders?
I would say from my experience, a lot of the times I didn't know the individual, and I did not know their name. I didn't know anything about the individual upon engaging the individual. But what I would do, if they're sitting on a bus bench, I would notice if they're sitting in the sun all day long without any water, very minimal water. I would notice if they're moving over into the shade. Are they moving around? Are they protecting themselves from weather? I would notice that. I would notice who's feeding them, who's not feeding them. Where are they getting their food from? Are they just stuck there on the bus bench? I would talk to the gas station attendant. I would talk to other homeless people around that person to gather information about that person, and I would do that in a systematic way to gather more information, even though if I don't know their name or don't know their diagnosis, I notice the behavior. I'm noticing the person's behavior, if that makes sense.
And you also mentioned that, if the individual is currently housed, living with family members,
Correct.
if you're called to a house call, you could use that opportunity.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
Well, if it's a house call, I definitely like to see the person's living arrangements. And I see if there's food scattered all over the floors, if there's feces on the wall, what's going on inside the person's living area. And I make note of that, and I also gather a lot of information from the family members about the person's behavior over the last 6 months, a year. Has this person been hospitalized before? Has outreach teams been called out before? Has this person denied services in the past? Um, and I would do that and just gather that information and gather a lot of that information. Are the parents older? Is the person acting out against the parents? Are the parents afraid? What does it look like for the parents? And gather all of that information and submit something. And then that's where I take it from there. Are they sitting in the car in the park in the parents' driveway and just been hoarding stuff in the cars, rats and feces in the car and everything else, and the person doesn't want to get out the car and hasn't moved out of the car? So it's those type of behaviors that I look for.
Thank you, Anthony. Dr. Partovi? You're on mute.
He just sparked something that I wanted to remember to say, that we often, especially if we see them in the streets or incarcerated, we don't think that they have family, but most of the time they do. And so I think it's really important to ask them, hey, is it okay if I talk to your brother or your mother or whoever? And a lot of times they'll like rattle off the phone number and they'll just know it. And it's like, wait, I got to write it down. And I've actually, called someone's family member in Hawaii, and lo and behold, like they had been looking for him for 15 years, so really important to remember that these people do have family, and the family know them the best. And so they can actually really help with the history.
That's a great point. And, this brings in something that Deborah mentioned yesterday with trauma-informed care. At the most basic level, taking a trauma-informed approach for this population means approaching people with humility and curiosity. And instead of thinking, what's wrong with you, thinking, what's happened to you? What's the context? And so that's what you were speaking to, Anthony and Dr. Partovi, is creating that context. You may not have the diagnosis, but documenting what you see, switching to what support do you need. Raul spoke to this, sometimes law enforcement, they're thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? This case was dismissed. What do I need to do differently last time? But like Deborah just mentioned, this isn't a test. The petition is not a test. It's a way to connect people to services, and the team might decide that a different pathway might make sense for this person, or they voluntarily engage in services so they aren't going through the care process. And so there are different pathways through that. Raul, I'm going to follow up with a question. Yesterday, there were some questions and in the chat today about the steps for filing a petition. And Deborah mentioned this is county specific, different court websites in the county will say what the steps are, but could you speak to your experience in that process of filing a petition?
So when we first started the CARE Act at Stanislaus County, first responders were filing each petition themselves. However, we've noticed that a lot of the same people that they were filing petitions for were people that they were already referring to the CARE team for assistance. So what we've done here is all law enforcement already sends the CARE team kind of a list of people that they're dealing with that have high calls for service, that have multiple citations or maybe misdemeanor arrest for like illegal camping, things that's more prevalent in the unhoused population. And they refer those names to us, and then we submit the petition or submit those names to County BH, Behavioral Health, who then will submit the petitions on behalf of the county. So we kind of triage them as a care team. So when someone comes in, say I received 10 names from the Modesto Police Department, we kind of go through and see we have that added, I guess, bonus of having mental health clinicians already on the team that can find out some of their background, kind of what's going on with them, that we can then find out, oh, this would be a good petition for care court, or what is somebody maybe we should work with amongst ourselves with the team. And once we do that, then we submit the names over to the care. I want to confuse everyone because there's the county care team and then the CARE Act team, who we then submit the names to, and then they'll submit the petitions moving forward.
So, Ann Hadrius, hi, Ann, in the chat asked, so specifically our first responders in Stanislaus, it sounds like they're not directly filing petitions. They refer to your team, and then your team decides the next step?
Yes.
And then you shared with us an example where you actually walked over to the court and filed a petition yourself. Can you speak to what was like and what you did?
So we had a client we've been working with quite a bit, and what we did is we put the petition together. We put a lot of information and took some time to get it together, walked it over to the courthouse, and then just turned it in. One thing that was nice is at our courthouse, they have a help desk that kind of helped us guide us on how we could, or what information may be missing, or we can kind of elaborate on. and then we submitted it over. We received a copy of it with the case number telling us it had been filed, and then hopefully the person would get into care court. And that's one of the individuals we talked about who was able to receive services. Even though they didn't get into care court, they started receiving services through behavioral health in the county, and has been really successful. So I think that's one of the things that we've learned is even if they don't get into the care court process or the care act process, them just being referred gives them a lot of resources that maybe they have not been receiving, and it's been leading to their deterioration out in the community. So it's really helpful for them to just receive some type of assistance, and it seems like care court has been that avenue.
And Raul, there are a couple of follow-up questions from Sharon from Humboldt County, I believe, Sharon. Has anything changed in that care process since care court became active?
For our process, it just gave us an added tool. So we were already receiving those referrals over to the care team, but it gave us an added tool to have give more help out to these clients that we're working with. I think there is somewhat, I know we talked about it yesterday, the black robe effect, that once, you go before a judge and the judge is like, hey, you need to really get, the help that you need, or, this can worsen your behavior, your well-being can worsen, and really you will deteriorate in the community if you need to address your mental health. I think there is an effect to that. And we've seen it with certain individuals who maybe are not, because they're such low-level crimes, aren't really going to court or aren't really seeing that court process, and they go before a judge, and the judge really says like, hey, you need to take on this help that they do, and it motivates them to use it. So for us, we've noticed it's been a great help, and also it's just an added tool for us to help individuals.
Mm-hmm. And then Sharon also asked, who's doing the legal paperwork? Is it members of your care team? How is that working?
So I've filed petitions, and I will file petitions also. The legal paperwork itself. Right now, we're trying a few different things, but usually it's county behavioral health files the petitions if they come from the care team. But I have done it myself, and we'll do it we're working on a few other individuals that I will be filing the petition for it.
Thanks, Raul. So I want to turn to Susan and Anthony again. So what are ways in which first responders could understand how to successfully engage in this population? So Anthony, if you can answer to that, and then Dr. Partovi, I have a specific follow-up question for you. Anthony?
For me, the population is a subpopulation of the general homeless population. It's a population that is isolated from the homeless population. So we're talking about deep isolation here with somebody that's severely mentally ill, that's had mental illness for a while, that's been untreated. And to engage that person, it's a slow process. I try to stay small. I try to talk very low because I don't know what's going on, and I keep my distance. And I always give that person an out to walk down the street if they need to walk down the street instead of in the middle of the street. And it's just about having compassion and understanding that this person may have been isolated from society as a whole for a very long time and just been isolated by themselves with their voices in their head or what's going on. So it takes a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding, and a lot of just listening at first. I think that's what it takes. And 9 times out of 10, what I found is the person that I'm working with, they want to be humanized. They want to be humanized first and foremost. And that's where I start. That's where I start at. It's just about getting to know that person, whoever they may be, or whoever they may be, who they may think they are. And I get to know that person first, and then I start this relationship, and I start gathering information. Short questions, first engagement, no longer than 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just to see how they respond to me. If they cuss me out, I take that as a good response, but at least they recognize me. I got somewhere to start off at. If it's nice and opening, I stay 20, maybe a minute at the most, because I don't want to take up too much of their time. Just short, and it gets longer and longer as time goes on, and that's how I engage people and get them the help they need. My first interaction is usually very, very short.
Thank you, Anthony. So, keeping your voice low, being very patient, giving them a physical space, and being responsive, and having a different level of what is a successful interaction, I think are some things that I'm hearing. Dr. Portovi, before I ask your specific follow-up question, do you have any other advice that you would say about engaging with this population?
Yeah, I'm specifically in Skid Row, and so sometimes they're like walking really fast, right? And so in the middle of the street, and with like no shoes, and maybe just a tank top and shorts in winter. So what we've been doing is bringing snacks, hygiene kits, socks in winter. I had hats and earmuffs, and so that really seemed to kind of stop them in their tracks. Just say, hey, do you need a hat? And she was like, yeah, actually I do. And she let me put the hat on her, and we can just say, okay, what's your name? Delilah. And it's like, okay, nice to meet you, Delilah. And so and they might just go on their way. I might follow it up with, do you need anything else? Or, for me specifically, do you need a refill on medications? Because that's how I'm trying to engage. And that's usually my opening to see if they're amenable to resources. And so that's one of kind of one of our ways. But yeah, like Anthony said, you're just you're trying to build a relationship. So, sometimes, it might take several times before they're open to saying hi to you. But, you just keep at it.
Yeah. And then another
Hey,
question that was asked. Oh, yeah, please,
can I
Anthony. Go
piggyback on
ahead.
that?
Yeah,
Uh,
of
uh,
course.
yeah. Thank you, Dr. Patobi, for saying that. For me, it's all about space and time. How close can I get to this person? Right? The first encounter, I'm kind of way back a little bit, and
Yeah.
as each encounter, I try to get a little bit closer, take another step closer, another step closer, because it's trauma-informed outreach. The more triggered they are, the farther I stay back, the more I gain trust, the closer I get.
Mm-hmm.
So I know space and time. So I'm looking at space and time also.
Nice. Yeah.
And so, Dr. Portovi, Raul, there are a couple questions related to, when first responders are in the street, interacting with this individual. Do you have advice for how do they know if what needs to happen in the moment? So, Dr. Portovi, it would be for you, does this person need immediate care versus referring to the care act process? What would your advice for first responders about making that determination in the moment?
So we can look at the definition of grave disability. So do they look like, emaciated or dehydrated, not refusing water or refusing food? Are they walking around half naked? I see that a lot. That's the closed part. Is it pouring rain and they're out in the rain and it's, really cold, in LA for us, 50 degrees is cold, but, you can be hypothermic in 50-degree weather. So, you really want to, ask yourself, is this person, a danger to themselves at this moment? Like, are they bleeding, stuff like that, where you need to call 911. So those are some of the things that I would look for. I just want to say real quick, there is a difference between someone who's being psychotic and someone who has what's called altered mental status. So if you're altered, you don't know who you are, or you don't know where your surroundings. If you're psychotic, they know who they are, they know where they are. They're capable of telling you, it's March, or what, the day and the time. But they're just dealing with their hallucinations or their delusions. So there is a little bit of a difference there, that if, I once saw someone who in jail, and she's like, oh, I'm at the mall shopping, so it's like, okay, you don't know where you are, something's medically wrong. So that's a little tidbit of the difference.
And you've mentioned in other situations that it's not an either or. It may be they need immediate help, and also the petition can be filed for care, whether that would be the first responder or alerting hospital staff, who are also eligible petitioners that, hey, this individual, after they're stabilized, might be appropriate to be referred to care.
Right.
So, and then Raul, a similar question was asked in how advice for law enforcement when they're interacting with the community, how should they determine or think about whether they should make an arrest or be referred to care? Can you speak to your advice there?
My advice would be, the officer is going to take a look at what the reason for the call for service was. Is there, they're always going to check if there's a danger to the community, a danger to, is there a victim involved? Will this person, if they're let go, are they going to victimize? Is there a crime that was committed? And if it's not, then we look at, I think what Dr. Partovi said, if this person then is a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or needs to be, or greatly disabled, and then needs to go in on a 5150, needs to be hospitalized. So I think it's kind of looking at both of those. Is there a crime that was committed that this person needs to be arrested for? Or is this something where someone's dealing with a mental health issue, is severely disabled, and needs to be hospitalized? And if one of those fits, then the officer takes that action. But I think with the 5150, that kind of also kicks off the idea of care court, because for the care court petition, it asks for a 5150 or 5250 to be present 60 days prior to the petition. So I believe on the petition it says there should be the person should have 250s, and one of them has to be within 60 days of the petition being filed. So I think that's one thing that they can look at. So if the person goes in on a 5150, then they should look at maybe this person is appropriate for a care court referral, and then be able to submit the referral from there. So it kind of almost kicks off, let's complete a care court referral because we are doing this 5150. And if not, if you can continue to have these contacts with this person, and okay, this person is dealing with a mental illness, not so much criminal behavior, then submit the care court petition. I think, honestly, when in doubt, just submit the care court petition. I think it's always helpful.
Dr. Rose?
Yeah, I just I want to add thank you, and thanks, Raul. A couple of things just to reinforce. And Dr. Partovi, you mentioned some of the difference in what a state of psychosis might look like. Again, I don't know that first responders need to understand the diagnosis or the cause, or even know about a 5250 or 5150. We really want to reinforce that the court is welcoming the petitions, and it's at the court's discretion. So if it seems like somebody might be a candidate who would benefit from care services, then we would encourage you to complete that. I also want to point out, and I appreciate I'm not a law enforcement person, and so Raul, thank you for answering these questions about how to deal with a situation in the immediate. But just a reinforcement that the care process is a civil process. It is not a criminal process, and so both can be occurring simultaneously.
Thank you. Susan, you're on mute.
I was just answering the question of when do you hospitalize someone versus, so it's not for the care proceedings. It's just in the moment, here are some, red flags that, wait, this person is in crisis and needs to be hospitalized.
Thank you, Dr. Partovi. Anthony, you had your hand raised. Did you want to add something?
Thank you, Ms. Rose, for saying that. And when I was talking about space and time, what I try to do is have an organic conversation with that person, and I might ask them, "Well, how's your day going?" Well, my day's going fine. Da 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 da. Do you know what day it is? And they might ramble off and on and on and on and on and on. And I might ask them, "What do you think about this president?" And da 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 da. Well, do you know who the president is? Yeah, one lady told me it was George Washington, and I was like, "Yeah, tell me a little bit about George Washington. What do you think?" And she got to talking and talking and talking, and I said, "Do you know what year it is?" She said, 1994. I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, makes sense." So I took that information and all the information I gathered around everybody else and put all of that information together. I didn't know the diagnosis, but it was just not clicking, you know? If that
And
makes sense.
thank you, Anthony, for adding that. That speaks to a question that Richard Morales asked in the Q&A about the different forms and what you need to have on each. And the answer, for that second half, so that Care 101 form, the mental health declaration needs to be filled out by a licensed BH professional, but then the narrative portion can include those details that Anthony referenced. Raul, do you have advice for that second form? So Richard asked, I am not sure where we can get the information on intensive treatment or hospitalization. So what advice do you have for first responders who are looking to have the right documentation?
So the intensive treatment may be difficult because we receive that from behavioral health most of the time. However, like Anthony was saying, if you're dealing with the person and you've been talking to them quite a bit, some of them will tell you, like, yeah, I have a case manager, I'm open to a treatment team or something like that, which you would then be able to document that if you know the person. But if not, then I would just put unknown. And with the hospitalization part, what we did is just look into calls for service. So as law enforcement, if you have, they can look into calls for service for that person. And if any of them resulted in a 5150, then that's what we document in that section. For the hospitalizations, we'd put, yes, hospitalized, twice within the last 2 years or something like that. But that's what we'd pull it from the calls for service and the agency's ability to pull that information.
And like we mentioned yesterday, and all of you have said, when in doubt, write it out. It doesn't need to be exhaustive, but enough, document what you know. Anthony had some great examples of the questions that can elicit that type of information. Dr. Partovi had some great advice for documenting in the moment. And then Raul, thanks for weighing in on what that can tactically look like. Raul, there's a follow-up question, curious from your perspective. In Stanislaus, has there been a situation where the judge has asked the petitioner to provide more information, or have those been going back to the BH team? I guess for first responders who are worried that, hey, I don't have all of this, I need to fill out every form, has that been a problem with judges?
I think at the beginning, we're just kind of working out some of the kinks. So some of the first petitions that we have submitted did come back, and then it would have, we would get a letter from the judge saying, I need a little more information on A, B, C, and D. But as we've worked through some of the processes and kind of worked with County BH, and I think it's been pretty smooth. So whereas when we submit a petition to the court, if the judge feels there's enough there that seems like this person could benefit or may be eligible for care court, then what they'll end up doing is give it to the County BH team, and then they'll do the follow-up instead of having law enforcement do it. Because through the process, we also learned that law enforcement has limited information for some of the things that are on the petition. So the care team that's through the CARE Act, they're able to receive that information because they're County BH personnel. So what the judge has done is put it over. So we submit the petition, puts it over for a while for them to do more investigation into some of the information that's not on the petition. So that's kind of where we go into you have any feeling this person would benefit from CARE Act, just fill it out and send it in and fill out the petition. And then usually the CARE team that's embedded into the court will follow up with it.
And I'm curious, there was a question. So the petition has been submitted. In Stanislaus, is law enforcement used or first responders used to serve the petition?
Serve the petition to the court?
To the respondent. So sorry, once the petition has been filed, has law enforcement been used to serve that petition to the respondent?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. And then one other follow-up question for you, Raul, and then I have another question for Dr. Partovi. Are there individuals, you mentioned that there was one individual where the successful outcome is that they engaged in services so that the case was dismissed. Are there other folks going through the CARE court process in Stanislaus?
Yes, so there's petitions that are coming in from everywhere, also from family members and from the CARE team, from law enforcement. So they have, I don't know exactly the stats, but I know we've had a CARE plan that we've started and working with an individual for that. I think a lot of them, what's happened though, is that the people that have been referred, maybe they haven't been in the mental health system, so they've taken like a lower level. They're willing to take on engagement and work with a team and be on a treatment team, maybe a full service partnership, have an assessment done. They're severely mentally ill. Now they're being case managed by a full service partnership. So I think there is that. There has been those successes through it. But one thing is we have to remember it is voluntary. So the person that goes into it has to also volunteer to keep participating in it, just like mental health services. One thing that we did notice as we worked through it, so our CARE team through the county was built to work with the unhoused population. But as we kind of start seeing this, I know we brought up individuals that are working that maybe are having these issues but are living at home. So that's one thing that we've been exploring. Dr. Partovi brought up a lot of these individuals have family, but what happens when those resources or they burn those bridges and they no longer have a family? And we're looking at now some of the CARE clients that are referred to CARE court that are individuals dealing with mental health issues, living maybe with an elderly mom or dad who can't help them, deal with those situations. So how do we submit those petitions? How do we help them out? Because those individuals in 10, 15 years, if they're go with untreated mental health, will probably be the next round of people who are unhoused that are living on the streets because they're not able to care for themselves and they've lost that support system that they've had. So that's kind of something that we're also looking into as the CARE team. How do we help those individuals?
Thank you. This has been a really helpful discussion. I was hoping we could do a bit of a round robin and just give your final thoughts of advice you would give to first responders who want to know how to engage in CARE and where they might turn to next for information. Dr. Partovi, what would your last words of advice be for first responders on how to engage in CARE? And you're on mute.
So for non-outreach workers, so police officers, fire department, paramedics, parole, definitely get to know the outreach workers in your area so that you can start collaborating with them and so that they might be able to use you and vice versa. And so I've always had really good rapport with police officers, and they know the community really well, and they know people really well. And then as say you're a police officer and you want a licensed social worker or a clinician, to help, you've got that kind of in your back pocket right there. And then together you can decide who's going to do the referral if someone qualifies. But I think that's very important to have those collaborations set up.
Thank you, Dr. Partovi. Anthony, what would your last bit of advice be for first responders who want to know how to engage in care?
First, I want to say thank you to all the first responders out there that are doing this work. Thank you very, very much. For me, it was about being invited to their roll calls in the morning, and them getting to know us, and us getting to know them. And there was maybe one or two roll calls, and we got to introduce ourselves, and they got to introduce themselves, and that's where the collaboration started. We went to their roll calls in the morning, and that's what started the collaboration. And we shared resources with each other and who to contact, who not to contact, and all of these other things that we needed to do. So we did that in their roll calls, and each relationship that I had with each police department was a really good collaboration with them. They invited us into the roll call, so we got to talk to them and share resources and give them points of contact and who to contact. So I would
Great.
definitely do that.
Thank you, Anthony. Deborah, what advice do you have?
Well, I would suggest to continue to do what you're doing, become educated, take advantage of training opportunities, look to resources. There are many of them available in your county, across the state. We offer frequent trainings and we have lots of information available on our website. My second piece of advice, I think, would be to let your purpose guide you. We're hearing that this is really about making efforts to engage people to services, and that can't be wrong. So if you're not sure, make the effort, complete the forms, which leads to my third piece of advice would be to partner with other organizations in your community, in your county, particularly behavioral health agency, your county behavioral health agency. That partnership will be vital.
And Raul, what would be your last bit of advice for first responders on the call and County BH?
I think I just echo what everyone's saying. I think collaboration is key to really help someone. The more tools you have in your tool belt to help the people that we serve, it's just beneficial to them and to the community that we're serving. So I think it's really working with County BH and understanding what their role is and what they can do and how they can assist law enforcement. Same thing as how law enforcement can assist County BH and work together on building collaboratives, building multidisciplinary teams to really be able to help the individuals and identify their main barriers that are leading to their untreated mental health, untreated substance use disorder, or for them being unhoused, and being able to kind of have this holistic approach and wrapping services around an individual. So I think it's really the collaboration that's key. And from my experience, multidisciplinary teams really assist in that collaboration.
Thank you. So this has been a really full conversation. Thank you to the people who are submitting questions in the chat. I know there have been some responses. We do as much follow-up as we can, and also we do post FAQs that come out of these sessions. So we'll be looking at the questions that have come through and follow up. Sam's putting in the chat a link to our website for resources. There are a few resources pinned at the top, are a good place to get started. If you'd like to join that listserv that I mentioned, you can complete that form. We send out announcements about once or twice a month about upcoming trainings, recently released briefs. So you can do that. For County BH, there's an upcoming open forum for courts and council and County BH to talk about what a successful collaboration look like in a county. So you can also register there. And really, there is no wrong door approach. So if you feel like you don't know where to go next, but you have some questions, please submit a question to our email address at info@careact.org, and we'll direct you towards who you might need to know. So thanks again to our panelists for sharing your expertise and all your different backgrounds. I feel like you were people that I learned from, and hopefully other first responders and County BH and other stakeholders on the call could learn from your perspective as well. So thanks, and we hope to continue the conversation.